Hey guys, it's Sophic, and today we're going to be reviewing Survivor Borneo and talking about their importance to the story. And at the end of the video, I'll go through over pretty much anything I missed by talking about the cast. I'll also be giving the season an overall score out of 10. Now, anyways, let's hop right into this. So the first boot is Sonia, and we don't really get much from Sonia. We have that moment with her and Rich where she's playing her ukulele, and Rich is just loving it. And that moment, it's a really good character moment. It shows that her social game wasn't terrible. It's just, she's like, what, 60-something years old, and at the challenge, she's the reason they lose pretty much because she falls over. So, and this is season 1 where physical capability means a lot more than it does nowadays. So she was kind of screwed just because of her age. 2 fun facts about her though. She's actually the first lesbian contestant, and she's actually the oldest living contestant right now since Rudy's dead. Next up you got BB, and you could just tell BB came out here for the survival aspect of it. He was such a hard worker, but he was also like, his social game was terrible. He was trying to whip everyone up into shape when he had the younger tribe of the 2 tribes, and it just wasn't working out. He was getting in fights with a bunch of people, and the one person that he actually seemed to be getting along with was Gretchen. And Gretchen kind of seemed like she was actually grooming him and keeping him in check so he didn't try to go overboard, but it didn't really work out. He still honestly might have made it a little bit further, but at one point he kind of asks to get voted out, and at that point, yeah, he just kind of sealed his fate. And I guess an interesting fact for BB is that his luxury item was a towel. Stacy, another person in a terrible social game. It seems like the only person on her tribe that even liked her was Kelly, and that's because they're 2 girls nearing the same age, I'm pretty sure. She definitely was just not good with Rudy. Her and Rudy hated each other so much so that she actually... People like to give Rich credit for creating the first alliance, but she kind of created the first alliance because she got together with Kelly and Sue and tried to get them to vote out Rudy. Kelly actually did follow through with the plan, but Sue was like, yeah, I'll tell you what you want to hear, but nah, I'm not voting off Rudy. And they actually end up voting off Stacy instead because they also think they don't like her, and they also think that she'd suck in challenges, even though she did good in the Beetle challenge. Her luxury item was a camera, okay? And another thing, she actually reminds me of Jerry. Like, this is the Jerry of this season, in my opinion. We have Ramona, and Ramona was the worst at the survival aspect, which, again, the survival aspect actually matters back then. She was not good around camp. She just was always just getting crapped on by the elements, it seemed. So, obviously, her tribe has to get rid of her. I don't think she was that good at challenges. I don't really think she was that good at anything. Her social game was decent. Like, her and Jenna kind of became good friends out there. But in that same episode where we see her and Jenna bonding, and Ramona's like, Jenna's my best friend. Jenna's like, yeah, I'm voting out Ramona. So it really didn't matter that much. Jenna even said it was too little too late when she kind of started getting better. So her tribe had really no other choice but to vote her off. Next up you have Dirk, and Dirk was pretty much just as useless around camp as Sean is, who we'll get to. And, he would spend his time reading his Bible because he was very Christian instead of working around camp. And at this point, at the end of the day, the real reason why he gets voted out is because the Toggy alliance of Rich, Rudy, Kelly, and Sue had started up at this point. And, they basically just had to choose between Sean or Dirk at this point. And I don't know why they chose to vote out Dirk, because they were talking in the episode, they're talking about voting out Sean. They're not even talking about voting out Dirk. So did they vote out Dirk because he's 1% smarter than Sean and Sean's easier to control? Maybe, I don't really know. Maybe Sean was actually slightly better around camp than he was. I don't know, because again, they were talking about Sean, not Dirk, so we really don't get to see exactly why they picked him, but the reason why he is out is because he was on the outs of the first alliance, other than the one that friggin' Stacy tried to make that didn't work out. Now we have Joel, and here's where Pagong just goes downhill. Joel, he was one of their better athletes, but here's the thing, okay, apparently he was kind of chauvinistic, and he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. I don't think he was being chauvinistic. I think he just had a bad social game and just rubbed everyone the wrong way, because if you remember, he also was one of the more conflictive people with BB. Either way, that's the way he was perceived, and a big part of that might be because they had freaking Jervis. Jervis says this thing about cows. It was like, nothing's dumber than a woman except maybe a cow, and apparently Joel just laughed at this so hard, and Jervis was able to basically, through things that Jervis was saying, like, oh yeah, I might have been the one who said it, but Joel lives and breathes it. And that actually pinned the target onto Joel. And you'll see, oh my gosh, Jervis can just get away with anything. But moving on, This does end up being a big reason why Joel was voted out. The 3 women plus Greg are the one who voted him out, so it's kind of apparent that it's really chalked up to the chauvinistic outlook that was on him, which I don't think was completely fair, but, you know, whatever. You get screwed over sometimes. Thank you, Jervis. Time for the merge boot, Gretchen. Now, Gretchen back on the Pagong tribe, she was the better version of BB. She was a better leader than him. She was well liked. Her leadership skills were better. And so coming into the merge, no one really thought that she was going to be the one voted out. But the Toggy Alliance, they're playing smart. They're voting for the biggest threats. And I think they would have voted for Greg, but Greg ends up winning immunity this round, so their next best target is Gretchen. And so obviously the 4 members of the Toggy Alliance pick out Gretchen, get her voted out. Everyone is like, what the heck? Why did Gretchen get voted out? Why did Gretchen get voted out? Is there an alliance? Is there an alliance? And yes, there is. People are still not completely sure about it, but it was definitely a good move by the Toggy Alliance. This was their best possible target, I think. Greg. I love Greg. Greg is hilarious when he's talking on the coconut phone, when he's singing, when he's doing this, when he's doing that. Everything Greg does, I love it. I love the family visit, or not the family visit, but the video with his sister. His sister is so weird and creepy, but in a way that didn't really creep me out because it was just so weird and so creepy that it kind of just went to the other side and was kind of enjoyable and kind of funny. So yeah, there's that. But at the same time, I think Greg is one of the best players this season. He seems to be one of the better challenge players. Gretchen, who seems to be the leader, is saying, no, I think Greg's the secret leader of this tribe. And a lot of people are saying Greg's also the best at the survival aspect. I think he would sleep in the woods. He wouldn't even sleep in the shelter. And yeah, he kind of did have Colleen wrapped around his finger. So his social game was pretty good. Even Rich, Rich was like, he was very analytical. He's like, yo, I think Greg is trying to pull something. And Jenna, she's like, yo, ever since we've switched to this tribe, ever since we've merged, Greg has acted completely different. So I definitely am starting to look at Greg in a more devious light now. So, I don't think we got to see much because Greg didn't, he didn't get to the end. He gets voted out here. But if Greg got further, I think we would have gotten a way more telling edit of Greg and how good of a player he actually was. The biggest flaw in Greg, though, is that I think he was kind of a troll and he didn't really care that much about the strategy of the game. Like, he makes it known that he thinks an alliance is just a really boring way to play the game. And he also at the final tribal just tells them to pick a number 1 through whatever the heck he says. So that's a really, really unrespectful way to cast your vote. And also another thing that kind of leans into this is when him and Colleen are hanging out and how they're just trolling the cameramen and telling them what they want to hear. I do think if Greg actually cared about the game, though, he would be a great player. I really do. Here comes Jenna Lewis. Super bubbly, super energetic, and super annoying. She got on a lot of people's nerves because she's just kind of crazy, kind of all over the place. And yeah, that's about all there is to say about Jenna. I mean, not many people really like her as a character. And on this season, she doesn't do much other than do those same exact things I just talked about. It does kind of suck when we hear that she didn't get a video back from home and she starts crying. But the main thing about Jenna this season is that the barbecue reward with Colleen, how they try to make up that alliance between Colleen, Jenna, Jervis, and Sean. And at this point, Colleen, Jenna, and Jervis are solid. And Kelly has pretty much left the Toggy Alliance because Kelly's really wishy-washy and trying to go back on it. Like, oh no, I think an alliance is 30 now, even though I've been doing it already. And so they really just need Sean. If Sean does this, they can get Rich out because they're all voting for Rich. But Sean's like, nah, I think he thought about it, but he's like, nah, I'm going to keep doing my alphabet strategy. And because he did that, it was actually Jenna's time to go home. And he's like, yeah, I'm voting for Jenna, but if I knew that she was going home, I wouldn't vote for her. I know she's not going home. I mean, come on, man. Everyone in the Toggy Alliance other than Kelly, who pretty much left at this point, votes for Jenna. And the alphabet strategy is the reason she went home and the reason why Rich didn't go home. This was the one time they could have really gotten Rich out. And I think that moment's kind of the one look we get into how Jenna's going to change up her game and kind of play a little bit harder in All-Stars. So she's really not a terrible... What she becomes is not a terrible player, but we'll talk more about that later. Jervis Never Nervous Peterson. Now, Jervis actually didn't play a terrible game this season. I mean, he was kind of slow on the uptake of the alliance, and he didn't make his own alliance. Like, strategically, when it comes to alliances and stuff like that, he wasn't amazing. But here's the thing, he got Joel voted out for his own comment. He literally got Joel voted out for his own comment. If Jervis didn't say the things and act the way he did, then that comment could have been really just put on him more so, and he could have gotten in trouble more for that comment. Now, he also was pretty lazy and also got away with being pretty lazy. Every time you see him in a confessional, he's sitting on a boat just chilling. He has a moment where he's like sitting on the boat just chilling with somebody who's fishing. He's like, yeah, I don't really fish. I just kind of sit on the boat and chill while they fish. And you really don't see that many people get mad at them. Like, there's one moment where Jenna's like, oh, you know, Jervis is kind of lazy. I'm surprised they haven't voted him out yet. Ha 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 ha. But she says it laughing. And I know there's some truth to that. And I know Jervis is not completely getting away with his actions. He's not a freaking mad genius. But he's getting away with it way more than he should. And that shows Jervis's social game. Like, if you see, like, I think Jervis's social game was actually pretty good this season. The last Pagong member, Colleen, I love Colleen. She's sweet. Her social game was one of the best social games out there. She's America's sweetheart, the original. But in terms of her gameplay, was not good. All she had was a social game, in my opinion. I mean, she wasn't terrible at challenges, but I mean, strategically, she just wasn't there. Like, she didn't care about the strategy portion of the game. So there's honestly not that much to say about her. I do think the Toggy member kept her the longest correctly. Like, if you're gonna keep someone the longest, you keep her. I do think she was the weakest threat out of all of the Pagong members. Now Sean is super interesting because he comes off as a dope. He makes the Super Pole 2000. He can't even fish, and Richard just completely outshines him in that department. And then pretty much everything else he tries to do around camp is not good. Just the way he talks and the things he says on a regular basis, you can tell like he is not the smartest person in the world. And he also, okay, here's my theory on Sean. He really, really wants to be viewed as a good person. You know, you can see it with the reward thing with Kelly. Like, he's just super wishy-washy and like doesn't know what to do and doesn't want to hurt people's feelings. But at the same time, he was out there playing strategically. He will tell you that alphabet strategy was strategic. All of the Pagong members had the earlier names. And I think the reason why he's not telling this strategy to the camera and you kind of just have to figure it out yourself is because, like I said, he wants to come off as a good person, not just to the contestants, but to the people on TV. He doesn't want to seem like a bad person to America. This is the first season, and no one knows how they're going to be perceived, especially with this alliance thing. Like, they don't know if America's just going to hate them for creating the alliance. So I think Sean's actually way smarter than people think, and he created a way to play strategically while still tricking his tribe mates and America into thinking that he was not being devious. He, however, is not in the main Toggy alliance, and he's kind of just a tag-along. So once all the Pagong members are voted out, it's just right for him to, you know, be next. So he does end up getting voted out in this spot. Oh yeah, it's time for Susan Hawk. Oh yeah. She was deeply cemented in the Toggy alliance since its creation. She was a hard worker. She does come off as like a redneck and not that smart, but, you know, strategically, she played a good game. I don't think she made that many people mad. Like, overall, her game wasn't actually terrible. She wasn't terrible in challenges. I think her social game wasn't terrible. She was an all-around decent player for season 1. Her and Kelly actually get a really big bond, and, you know, Sue's talking about how she hadn't had a best friend in so long and how Kelly's her best friend, how she's not going to burn Kelly. Fast forward to Kelly playing both sides and trying to look good for the jury by going back on the alliance thing, and this really makes Sue mad, and it really hurts Sue because she really viewed Kelly as, like, her number one. Like, they were planning on voting out Rich at some point. But, you know, that doesn't end up happening, and I actually feel bad for Sue in this spot because Kelly really is doing that wishy-washy kind of Sean thing, and Kelly gets mad at Sean, but Kelly kind of does the same thing Sean does at points in this season. Sue's just a likable character in this season. She has a lot of good one-liners and things that she says. She's actually pretty good at talking, and guess, you know, the ultimate example of how good Sue is at talking is her final tribal snakes and rats speech, which to this day, you know, this is season 40, still the best final tribal speech in the history of the show. I mean, I think it's almost the level of genius. Being able to relate their situation to the island and the animals on the island itself is just so poetic and so good. Now, the part about the not getting her a drink of water, she was dying of thirst, I mean, she does go a little bit too far and it's really over dramatic, but that makes it better. That makes it better. I don't know where she found it in her heart to be able to say stuff like that, but I like it. Rudy, how can you not like Rudy? If you don't like Rudy because of the things that he says, I mean, this is season 1, long time ago, and even back then he was old as crap, so you just need to get over yourself if you don't like Rudy. Rudy is comparable to BB because they're both old men with really good work ethics that didn't really fit in with their tribe, but as you can see, Rudy handled the situation way better. He only got like the only person super mad at him was Stacy because Rudy knew kind of when to back off a little bit, and he was just, his social game is just straight up a lot better than BB's. You can see it in his relationship with Rich. Rich and Rudy maybe had the strongest relationship on that island other than when Sue and Kelly were together. And that is one weird couple. You got freaking Rudy, this Navy SEAL, and you got Rich, the naked gay guy. It's amazing. It really, this relationship makes the season a lot better than it would have been without this relationship. If Rudy gets the end, Rudy actually probably wins the game, but he fails at the final mini challenge. He loses focus for a second, and it's so funny because at the final tribal, he really doesn't have any question for the two finalists. He's like, I just want to say that I super regret me failing at the mini challenge. And it's like, oh, Rudy, come on, man. Rudy's biggest strength this game him was his loyalty. Loyalty is super important, especially in the earlier seasons of Survivor, and as long as people can get over Rudy's lack of ability and challenges and how old he is and his personality, you really should be able to use Rudy as a good ally. I mean, loyalty is that important. Like, if Rudy was younger, I think he'd actually be one of those players that gets really far every time he plays. Now we're down to the 2 finalists, and first up we have second place, which is Kelly Wigglesworth. Now Kelly, challenge-wise, she's good. She won 4 in a row. Social game-wise, she's actually great and one of the better ones of this season. She had a really close bond with Sue, and the reason why that broke up was her strategic game, really, not really her social game. Well, partly her social game. She had a really good bond with Stacy early on, and she had a good bond with all the younger members of the Pagong tribe. And I think the big reason why Kelly's social game was so good is because, yes, she was younger, but she could be very mature, and I think she acted mature based on who she was around. Strategically is where she floundered. She was way too wishy-washy this game. She wanted to be in the alliance, she didn't want to be in the alliance, and that really ruined her relationship with Sue, which caused them not to be able to vote out Rich, which she really needed to be able to vote out Rich. She should have went to the end with Sue, for being honest. If she went to the end with Sue, she would have won, but no, she went with Rudy and Rich. So, I mean, at least she was smart enough to pick Rich over Rudy, where she did only lose to Rich by 1 vote, but, you know, bad strategic game by her, to be honest. And the biggest example of that one, it was the 2-2 tie where her and Sue voted for Rich, and Rich and Rudy voted for Sue. And on the revote, for some reason, Kelly just voted for Sue instead of keeping the tie going, which made 0 sense and just showed, like, made Sue probably hate her even more. So it just shows, like, Kelly didn't know what she was doing strategically at all. Finally, we get to the man himself, the OG winner of Survivor, Richard Hatch. Richard does beat Kelly by only 1 vote, and I do think a big proponent of that was Sue's speech. Sue's speech really hurt Kelly's chances, in my opinion. However, Richard's biggest move of the game was creating the first ever alliance that worked. Without that alliance, this game would have been completely different, and I have to give props to Richard for that, for doing that. Richard just comes off very analytical. I mean, I know he's a very analytical person and a very strategic person, and it's shown throughout the season. I think his very tight bond with Rudy shows that he knows what kind of people are good alliance members, and I think him voting out Gretchen and Greg first from the Pagong tribe also shows that he knows who the biggest enemies of him in the game are. Fishing was also very strategic. He did know that him fishing, you know, the other people wouldn't want to vote out the person who is providing for the tribe. So yes, he is good at the survival aspect, which is another good point going towards him in his game, but that was strategic, and you could tell by the way he talked about what he was doing that he's always thinking strategically, and strategy was his #1 ability within this game. Socially, I don't think he was one of the worst people of the season, but I also don't think he was one of the better people. He seemed to get along with the people in his alliance, but the people outside of the alliance kept targeting him. I don't think that's completely because they knew he was the biggest threat. I do think that's actually just because of his social game, and that they didn't really like him that much, and he came off arrogant. You know, he is arrogant, and he has that confessional at the beginning of the season where he's talking about how he already knows he's going to win, and it's that kind of cocky attitude that's going to make people mad, and he has to keep it under wraps. You can tell he does try to keep it under wraps a little bit, but he's not the best at it, obviously, because everyone's just talking about how cocky he is all the time. Punch-wise, he again wasn't the worst, but Kelly was better than him in this area as well, as she did win more immunities than he did. Rich does obviously end up getting Sue and Rudy's vote. He also gets Sean's vote, and I do think that that's just because Sean respected him more. And he does, the one Pagong member's vote that he does get that Kelly doesn't get is Greg. And a lot of people like to think that it's because Greg did the number 1 through 10 thing and that Rich got the number right. But at the same time, I do think Greg, he would have voted, if he voted normally, he would have voted for Rich as well, because he does just seem to also respect Rich more. You can tell throughout the season that he does. And the biggest way to tell is Greg's speech at the end when the camera's on him and he's talking about Kelly, how he's like, oh, we got to see all of Kelly's multiple sides. She was like Two-Face, you know, she's like, oh, I'm a hippie, but I'm not a hippie. I'm a double agent, but I'm not lying. And I find that interesting, is what Greg says. And that's just something that no one would respect. Somebody that you can't even tell who they are. They're just being like they have like multiple personality disorder. Yeah, Kelly garnered more friendships and had the better social game, but I do think respect won over friendships in this game. Like, respect ended up being more important than friendships. And the fact that strategically Richard was just so much better than Kelly, and at camp life he was better and he was the provider of the tribe, and you end up with a Richard winning this game. Now overall, this season doesn't really have a theme. You know, it's the first season. The challenges and the rewards are just way worse than how they are nowadays, again, because it's the first season. So being the first season, you can't really give this season much credit in a lot of areas when you compare it to other seasons, other than the nostalgia, I guess. I mean, there's literally a reward where Jervis pretty much just wins one slice of pizza. It's just a completely different game than it is nowadays. I mean, there's only one alliance, and there's so many more like character moments, and it's a lot more about survival, and it's just the focus of this season is just not where the focus of many other seasons is. And because of that, this season does get boring to me at times. But, I still like the season, and cast-wise, there's some really good characters. You got Rich, Rudy, Greg, but there's also a lot of duds, too. It is a pagonging, but there are a lot of moments where you could actually see maybe Rich going home or the Alliance falling apart, so that does keep it interesting. And taking all of this into consideration, I'm going to have to give this season a 4.1 out of 10. That's the end of the video, guys. Please tell me what you feel about this video in the comments. Tell me how I can make these videos better. Give me some tips, this and that. And if you liked the video, like the video. And if you want to see more, subscribe. See you later, guys.